Good morning and welcome to the Morning Spotlight Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Ham, coming to you as always from the Spotlight Studios here in Morristown, New Jersey. How do you go from pro soccer player to VP of one of the largest mortgage companies in America? More importantly, what did he learn along the way? Well, the answer is a lot. Once an Olympic USA soccer player, my guest today quickly learned how to get cut, in quotes, and literally get cut. Fitness and mindset became masteries for my guest very early, as his career was affected by the 2007 market crash, just years after his soccer team days came to an end, right when he was raising toddlers with his wife. He has mastered the art of a growth mindset, the art of winning, and the art of staying fit. He believes in integration and health over all things. He's an executive director at loanDepot, a proud father, an influencer, a top-rated podcaster, and just simply a fabulous soccer dad. He throws that suit down and coaches his daughter's league with joy several times a week. It's his mission with his new book, Conversations with Covey, to highlight some of the most incredible stories he's gotten to share on his podcast, The Brian Covey Show. He is Brian Covey. Brian, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I love listening back to some of that because, you forget through life, we get to do a lot of things and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's very cool. We got connected, I think, through Steve Sims. I think that's who ultimately connected us, who's a great guy, was obviously a former guest of the show, was one of our most listened to episodes. And if you know anything about Steve, you know why that was one of our most listened to episodes. But I'm very excited to have you on here, just kind of going through your background. I also have a sports background, was not an Olympic athlete by any stretch of the imagination, but was a college baseball player, so it's nothing to sneeze at.
Still great.
Yeah. And here we are. We're in real estate. We're podcasting. We're like the same person, just, you have more hair than me. So I'm excited to talk to you today.
Dude, I love it. And you got a much better beard. I've tried to grow that, man. And it is not, and my wife will say no way because she's always right. And I can't grow a good beard. So yeah, congrats.
Yeah. Right. Well, everybody has their talents, You got the hair, I got the face hair. It's all good. So I want to kind of start at the beginning. So you grew up in Memphis, correct? And then you probably, like me, were 8 years old. I was on the purple team. I'm not sure what team you were on when you started playing soccer. But at what point in your soccer life did you realize, hey, I'm actually like really good at soccer?
Oh man, I think it's a journey, but I was a younger brother. So for anybody out there, it's the younger sibling, 5 years difference. So imagine where I was growing up with my older brother playing in different sports. As I showed up to the field and I witnessed this last night with our youngest is 6. And he doesn't care what age he's playing with, right? Like he's over there playing with 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 8-year-olds, whatever. They just love to play. And I had that from an early age. My dad coached basketball. I had a guy that you might know the name, Kyle Rote Jr. Okay. He's one of the probably most well-known American footballers and soccer players, played with Pele and guys of that sort. And he actually went to our church. He coached my team when I was like a little toddler. So little did I know I would have such an amazing start. But to answer your question, Michael, it was probably around 14. We have an Olympic development pool. And so you make your local team, you make your state team, you make your regional team, you make the national team. It just keeps getting smaller and smaller, right? Like you keep going on to figure out how far can you go.
Right.
And I was fortunate enough at an early age that they let me continue to go. And I realized very quickly I was good enough, but I wasn't the best. And there were always areas I could improve. And that's been a driving factor of, when you go and play in Europe and you go other places, you're exposed to a higher level. And it doesn't matter if you're in business, dad, spouse, whatever, there's always another level for us. And that was, for me, I realized I'm good, but I need to consistently go because there are people out there that are really good. They're not going to quit.
Right. Yeah. I remember, this is just a fun story. So when I used to coach college baseball, I worked at the Stanford University baseball camp a couple summers. And I remember they did this whole thing. So there's like 400 kids in the camp and they kept saying okay, this half is going to be done after high school. The half of that is going to be done after college. Then they brought up 10 kids and they said, this is how many out of this whole group that'll make the next level. And then they took one kid's hat off, put it on the dugout, and they're like, this is how many people will actually make it to the big leagues. And it just kind of puts it all into perspective. But one of the questions that I had is you mentioned that, you were good, maybe not the best, and you saw different things, different, types of players, different ways of training. Was the work ethic thing, and I barely know you, this is the first time we've ever talked before, was the work ethic something that was always a part of your life? Or is that something that as you kind of progressed through sports and you started seeing hey, if I want to succeed at this, I really need to put the pedal to the metal? So which one was it?
Oh, dude, that's a great question. So I had that from an early age. I'll say I was very fortunate that both of my parents worked and worked very hard. And my dad ran his own practice and my mom worked for the city. And I watched them both tirelessly work and like never complained, never came home and were like, I'm too tired to spend time with you guys. My dad volunteering coaching. My mom made sure I was at the sporting events and all that. So I was fortunate in that I saw that in my parents, that they worked hard. And I had a couple of coaches early in life. One was a police officer, and then one had moved here from Poland. And their work ethic and the things that they would push you to do was different. I mean, it was just a different environment, atmosphere. But I will say, here's the separator that I've learned that's taken me into business today. It's not just what you do at practice. The reality is to be great, to make it into that next level, where whether it's college or professional or on, all of the things that people never saw when I was in the gym shooting or practicing or running late at night, early in the morning, all of the time that I was doing stuff on my own as a kid. It was building that muscle, building that endurance and that discipline. So I would say I was in a great environment, but it also took me recognizing, you know what, if I'm going to be great, if I'm really going to pursue this dream of playing professional, I've got to put more work in than just 3-4 practices a week. That's not, I realized I went to those like over in Europe and was playing in the summer. You can't just play at practice and hope to get better. You got to do more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's 100% true. And you mentioned not just in sports, but just in business in general, with really anything that you're doing. And we're going to get to all of the things that you do over the course of this episode. But I think that's phenomenal answer. So how long were you at the professional level playing soccer?
Just a couple years.
Just a couple years.
I came out of college and I was very fortunate and had a unique path of where I thought I was going to college, ended up not working out. And the coach retired. And he reached out. I'll never forget that day. He reached out and he said, "Hey, Brian, this is going to be my last year. I know you've committed and you're coming here." And it worked out really well for me. So anybody out there, I didn't think about staying local in my own town, even though Memphis was a top 25, top 30 school, D1, Conference USA, all that. But I went because of the coach and because of the culture. And I knew some people and I had an opportunity to compete to play my freshman year. And I thought at that stage of my life, and that's what's interesting about joining a team or starting your own business is you got to find what's right for you. Because a lot of people are like, oh, you need to go to this top 10 school or do this to get exposure. For me, I made a really good selection of, I put myself in the game. I put myself in a position that I could compete and play. And that was really kind of a catalyst for me for later. That was great. But I will say this, when I went and played professional, I'll never forget the first camp out in Colorado. And I had one of the senior guys, right? Like he's been in the league 10 years. I'll never forget him telling me, he's like, "Brian, you've got to start investing. You got to start taking care of yourself. This game isn't going to last forever. You could get injured today. You could get injured next week." And I remember I was like, "Whoa, you're just crushing my dreams, man."
Right. Slow down.
Like,
yeah. Right.
what? And I will say that was actually a lot of wisdom looking at a guy that had been in the league that I view as highly successful. And he's given me just a real honest take on the league and where he is. And he loves it. He enjoys it. At the same time, he's raising kids at that point. And he's saying, you know what? You need to have this kind of integration in life of, you can't just be a soccer player. You can't just be a dad. Like all these things go together. And also, by the way, it's not a lot of money, so don't go spend it all right away. Right. Like
right.
Some lessons very quickly.
Yeah.
And what a great experience, man. I take all those lessons and just, even this day, I think that's the importance of having a coach, a mentor. Ask people questions that are doing what you want to do, that are further along, because you may think it's one way. You may get insights to help you navigate that they've learned, and it accelerates your experience and your ability to win, because I've now taken their experiences combined with my experiences. We've multiplied that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things, we've talked about it a couple times in this show. I forget what guest brought it up, but he talked about like the Malcolm Gladwell thing, the 10,000 hours to become an expert. Like, why wouldn't you leverage other people's 10,000 hours to help you get to the next level of whatever it is that you're trying to do? Which I think is exactly what you're saying. And I've been in the same boat for sure. So, okay. After the soccer playing career, what was the next job then? So, you get this advice, the soccer career comes to an end, as most sports careers do. So what was like the first thing that you did? I'm assuming, did you have kids when you were, after you were done, or was that after the playing days?
After, yeah, it was a few years after. And you could probably imagine this, Michael, like I was really desired to go work in a place that I had no experience.
Yeah.
I say that sarcastic. Like, I left college and my resume read a lot of soccer accolades, right? Like a lot of those things. And then when you go play, you don't have much on your resume. So as I went in and I tried to interview, my dream was always I'd see dads of the guys I played soccer with, and they're like financial planners. They worked in the bank, they're in real estate, they're home builders, mortgage, all this. Well, I thought, well, hey, I've got great connections. I'm going to go apply for a job. Well, this was around 2001. Anybody that was in the business at that time realizes like it wasn't a great growth year. Like it was very stagnant. It was not one of those years people were hiring. I got really close to being hired with a local bank. I remember him calling me. I'll never forget. And it was one of my best friends. It was his dad. And he's like, hey, we got a hiring freeze. I'm like, what's a hiring freeze? Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't understand all this stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And I realized in that moment, you know what, I don't really have the skills. What do I have? So if I don't have what they're looking for in the market, what do I have? Well, I've been a captain of the soccer team. I have leadership. I'm willing to work hard. To your point earlier, I'm willing to do what other people are not willing to do, which at that time was like, I'm willing to work weekends. I'm willing to be a mentee. I will take whatever you'll pay me because look, the league doesn't pay a lot. And I went into a career fair. I'll never forget that day I went into our school and I was asking our coaches and they're like, why don't you show up to this career fair, Brian? I'm thinking, there's not going to be anybody there. No,
Right.
like I'm not going to want to work at these places. Well, like, why am I even going? Well, I met a guy there and I'll never forget. He's like, we're looking for athletes. We're looking for people that are highly competitive. We pay great commission if you're good at what you do. We have a training program. So I'm going, hold on. You're going to coach me. You're going to teach me. And I just have to show up and work hard and do what you tell me to do. Like I've done this all my life. Like I can do that.
Right.
And then of course they offered me the job. It's about 45 minutes to an hour one way drive. And I lived in Memphis. So it was just across into the next state, into Mississippi. And I start putting all this together and I'm like, you know, let's go. Like nobody else is hiring me.
Right.
And so I say it's probably like with you is like, I didn't necessarily choose it. I knew what I had studied. I knew I liked finance and economics and real estate and marketing and all, but I went because I found somebody that was willing to teach me and train me. And I found a culture that I thought I would fit. Right. And
Right.
then, man, from there, I spent 13 years at
Yeah.
the same company.
Right.
Crazy.
Yeah, crazy. And I think that was, I mean, very similar experience to me. So after I was done coaching, you know, I was looking for jobs and it was like the same thing. I mean, I had some accolades in college as a baseball player, and then 4.5 years as a college baseball coach, which if you go to a regular job interview, they're like, okay, so you've been doing nothing. It's like, well, actually, no. Like I've been doing a ton, and it can be frustrating for sure. I mean, I went to job interview after job interview after job interview,
Oh, yeah.
and just nothing ever really worked out. And then now, fast forward, here I am selling title insurance. So obviously, you could see the clear career path go from baseball to title insurance. That's
Oh, I
just
mean, like, why wouldn't you? I mean, I think
right,
every baseball player, right? Like,
right. It's all teed up for you, literally. Yeah,
well, I love what you said there too, because part of that, I did go try some things. This is the best advice I can give people in that season is I went and tried things. So I went and got my coaching license at a pretty high level in soccer. If you play professional, you can jump into what they call a C license. I got my B license. An A license, to give you an idea, you're a college or professional coach. Like you've got to be. So I got all the way as far as I could go, got that license. Thought I was going to go back and get my master's and coach. I'm like, no one's hiring me. I know soccer. I know I can go coach. And while that would have probably been a great avenue, you got to be open to possibilities. I even went and worked part-time for my dad. I went and worked part-time helping out. I was coaching, doing private lessons. I was doing whatever I could do until something came along. I didn't just sit on my rear at home and go, at that time living with my parents trying to figure it out. Go
right.
do things.
Yeah.
And if you do things will become more clear. Doors will open.
Right. I mean, like you said, I mean, you spent 13, has it been 13 years at loanDepot? That's
No, that was actually at Wells.
okay.
And so I spent 13 years there. My first time, I thought, oh my gosh. So this is another one. I thought I would retire. Like I look back, I go, I was so naive joining the same company. I'm going to retire there. Like, that's what my mom had done. I thought it was possible.
Yeah.
Well, the world's changed a lot,
Yes.
and I'm grateful for those 13 years, but at some point you got to know when it's time for you to go try something else.
Right. Yeah, 100%. But I think that it's, for me, it's very similar because I was doing a lot of those job interviews, seeing what was out there, trying different things, and then got into this title insurance world because my father had worked in the title industry for close to 40 years now. And so I knew, something about it. I knew that it was boring, but I knew that it had provided him and me a good life over the course of my life. and
Yeah.
his. So, and then once it was the same type of thing. Once I got all those experiences that I had and all those types of things that I had, those skill sets that I had no idea I was developing prior to joining this company. And now I get in here and now I can let them shine. I can make them work for me. And I think that that's something that people that play sports or coach sports or are involved in sports in some capacity, those are just things that you develop over time. And some people may not see them, but the people that give those chance in the business world, I think are rewarded for that for sure.
100%.
Absolutely. So, all right. So then you're at Wells. So at some point you make the switch over to loanDepot, right? Is that the next step? So has it been two companies or
No,
were there other stops in between?
there was one in between that was
Okay.
very interesting. And you'll probably get this from the sports side of me is I was loyal as some people might say in business. Like I was loyal to a fault, right? Like I knew the people that had brought me up in the business, they had taken a chance on me. And I was always trying to figure things out, right? I got passed over for some promotions, but I did get some promotions and, it was that mixed feeling. So I remember it was probably late December and we were in some meetings and I could just tell the culture was changing. And there was a lot of, those people are in the bank world. You always kind of know it's just things start to change and you start to see the signs. And I had a friend of mine that we'd worked together and she reached out and she's like, "Hey, I'm at this company, Movement Mortgage, great company. They're privately held out of Charlotte." And she's like, "I need someone to come help build our team, like grow out, do business development, teach and train and coach and do all these things." She's like, "I want you to come be my boss." And I'm like, "What? Like, I'm happy.
All right.
Like, what are you talking about?" And literally, I'll never forget this, Michael. She goes, "Hey, look, we've got you a ticket tomorrow to fly out to Charlotte to meet our CEO and our owner and all that. Will you just fly out there and meet them? Because they've interviewed people, they can't find anybody they like." And so finally I told them, like, "Will you just go talk to my guy, Brian? Like,
Yeah.
he's awesome. He'll fit the culture. He'll do really well." And I remember at that time, I'm leaving an organization that's all suited up, right? The bank, it's like suit and tie, very corporate-y and all of that. I go out there in my suit and tie and all that. I can tell it's a different vibe. And I'll never forget talking to the CEO. We just started to vibe. We were the same age. He and his wife owned a CrossFit gym, and we started to make these connections. He'd played professional football. I'd done professional soccer. I'm like, again, look for people that you can align with that you're like, hold on, like we have similar values. We're on the same page. I'm like, look, I don't know what you're building, but I remember leaving, moved my flight back a couple hours because the conversation was going so well that day. And I left and I'm like, I called my wife. I was like, "I'm going to end up joining this team. I can just tell you, I don't know when it's going to be, what it's going to look like." She's like, "What's your position going to be?" "I don't know." Um, and it was just funny to me because when you know, and that was an instinctual thing. And that's what I would implore anybody is like, surround yourself with those people where you fit. And I had a coach tell me once is go where you're celebrated, not tolerated. And they saw the talent in me, probably like you as a baseball player and a coach and all these things. There are talents in you that you can help drive the business forward and help them win. And I started to realize, oh, these are talents that not everybody has.
Right.
I thought everybody was driven and committed and worked hard and all that. Oh no, they're not.
No.
So I spent 4 years there, helped them build it out. Incredibly along the way, I'm always one of those looking for a mentor or coach. One of the co-founders introduces me to our CEO, happens to be at loanDepot.
Yeah.
Now, keep in mind, they have no presence here in Nashville where I am. Like it's a call center and there's really not a lot of people on the ground. So I never thought of even the possibility. Well, things change fast in title, real estate, mortgage so fast so that I remember one day and I'm watching the CEO at loanDepot, Anthony, and he's speaking at one of these fintech conferences. And I'd been talking to him and he'd been kind of mentoring in a way and talking to me and a couple of the executives there I started to connect with. Like, man, I really vibe with these guys. They had such a big growth mindset. And I was in a season where I was like, okay, we're growing, but it kind of hit a wall. It's like, well, do we want to grow? Do we not want to grow? And it was a lot of change. It felt a little bit corporate-y. And I remember getting a call and they're like, "Hey, I want you to fly out to California to meet everybody." Well, again, one of those, when you're not looking, sometimes things happen.
Yeah.
And I went out and I was absolutely blown away. I was re-energized. I was excited about what's there. And so, yeah, fast forward another 4 years. And man, we have absolutely blown up where like 250 million a year in mortgage volume. We'll do just under 3 billion with our team this year. And I love it. It's very entrepreneurial and it gives me some of that freedom to flex some skills that I've learned, but I also want to improve on. And that's the environment I want is where I can contribute and be, a key player, but I want to be challenged. I want to learn and become better. And wow, sometimes you just don't know that these opportunities, they're just one call, one meeting away if you take it. And I'm glad I said yes to both of those,
Yeah.
because both of those I think were really important in those seasons and have made me who I am today. So very thankful actually for actually all three employers.
Yeah. You know what I've noticed that I really like is that you identify these things as seasons, which I feel like is the athlete coming out of you, right? Is that
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's what it is.
Think about 4 years in college, right? Like
Yeah.
that's a season of life,
Yeah.
basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. So, talk to me also about, because obviously you have all these skills that are just kind of built up over time. But obviously, when you get into this business that you're in, so doing mortgages with Wells, loanDepot, whatever, so talk to me about the importance of like immersing yourself in that and learning all you can about that specific industry, because I feel like people go, they're almost hesitant because if they feel comfortable in a specific role, whatever that may be, to jump ship. So going from soccer to mortgages or go from baseball to title are things that are not necessarily things that people do all the time. And I think
Yeah.
that sometimes people get a little bit scared off because now they're going to have to learn a totally new field and kind of be, granted you have the leadership skills and the work ethic and all that, but you are kind of behind everybody else that maybe has been doing it for a while. And then talk to me about the importance of making sure that you get your bearings, and that way
Mhm.
that you can use both of those things to kind of accelerate you faster than maybe somebody else at a company like that.
I love that question too, because where I would go with that is comfortability, and that comfort zone is dangerous for anybody at any level, whether you're new or you're even in retirement. In retirement, right? I was talking to someone the other day and they just retired, and they've been kind of a mentor, and they're thinking about their legacy and investing and how they can support some nonprofits, and they aren't comfortable. They're still trying to make a difference and an impact. So they're putting themselves out there. And the other thing is that I was listening to that, Michael, what I would look at is you've got to think about this as being a student of the game. In every role, every season that you're in, there is always more we can learn. And I've realized that this past year, I went back and got my certified mortgage advisor license, right? Like I'm not originating loans anymore in the day to day like I used to, but I felt it was important for me to always be a student of the game and continually learn. And if you don't take risks and put yourself out there, you're never going to know what you are capable of. And that's where I believe in raising your capacity. And I'm one of those, like the athlete in me. Early this year, I'll tell you, I had been working out really hard. I was training really hard and all this. And I don't know if you've ever had anybody do this yourself, but I tore my bicep tendon. Not fun. Rips off the bone, like right below my arm.
Doesn't sound fun.
And it's not good.
No.
So if you read about it, some people, power lifters and other guys, it'll snap. I've seen people do it, their arms out and it'll snap there. It's just over time, right? Like
Yeah.
being an athlete and training hard.
Sure.
So it happens. Well, what's interesting about that is I had to start over on everything, right? So I'm in our group, our athletes that we train together and still in that competitive vibe is much like a CrossFit, right? We do a lot of powerlifting, we do a lot of cardio, we do a lot of just different things to challenge ourselves. That's what makes you better. And so early this year, I had to go back to square one. I couldn't lift a glass of water with my injured arm. And I'll never forget the doctor telling me, he's like, look, it's going to be 6 months. You're going to be starting to do a lot more at 6 months. But after a year, you're going to be stronger than you were before. But you got to put the work in. And I'll never forget going to PT. And it was such a great reminder for me. It's like, sometimes you got to go back to basics. Sometimes you got to go do things you suck at or you don't know and you're not good at.
Yeah.
It's building a muscle. And I love that because for me, this has been a great season, not just in my rehabilitation of my arm, but in my relationships and my fitness and other areas of growth. We've added 7 leaders to our team in a season that you can't really get out and see people like you used to.
Right.
The only thing I can really attribute that to is like my mindset has changed. I'm not afraid to fail. I have a tagline we use is empowered by failure. And in every time that you start something, guess what? You're not going to be good at it right away. Because if you were, everybody would go do it. And they would be all these wonderful billionaires and people that were just successful because they did it once or twice and they were great. It's not life. I mean, I'm sure the first time you threw a baseball or you were hitting, you weren't hitting home runs, right? Like you can throw different pitches. I thought about soccer. Like, I remember having to struggle to use both feet. It's no different in business or relationships. You got to be okay with the fact that you're not going to be good at everything. You might start something. I mean, here's what I've learned is the base hits, kind of use a baseball analogy.
Yeah. Go for
The
it.
base hits add up. Like how many home runs are hitting a game?
Just a
It's the
few.
base hits that
Yeah.
get people in.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
Oh, a
Yeah.
lot more I could jam on with that, but I would just say, man, that's such a
Yeah.
mindset thing that I love.
Right.
Got to embrace it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you also mentioned, and I think you mentioned about loanDepot that it was is maybe still very entrepreneurial,
Yeah.
which I like, and that's what my job is also, which kind of gives me a lot of freedom to do a lot of the things that I do. But I also work for a Fortune 500 company, so there's like the overarching umbrella, and then there's Mike Ham doing his thing, and everyone's like, "What's this guy's deal?" Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Know that well.
yeah, but talk to me a little bit about that. Like, talk to me about this maybe I don't know if it's struggle is the right word, but the balance that you need to strike between being a part of a larger company, but also, and we're going to get in here in a minute to some of the other stuff that you're doing on your own, but the entrepreneurial side of it, maybe the personal branding side of it,
Yeah.
within this framework of a larger corporation.
And such a great question. And it's a great topic for people that are like us that, I'm actually an entrepreneur with an entrepreneurial spirit, meaning that, look, I don't own the company. We're publicly traded and all those things people can look up. But I've always been part of a company that someone else was actually the owner and they took the risk on it. But I always felt like I was part of that team. And that's probably some sports in me that there's a head coach, there's an owner, or whoever. But I always wanted to be part of a team. And I'll say 4 years ago was probably the tipping point for me. It might have been 5 years ago. People will laugh at this, but I didn't have a Facebook page. And my wife had a Facebook page. So we go to one of our award ceremonies, like the President's Club,
Sure.
Chairman's Elite stuff.
Yeah.
And we're there. And I'm making all these friends right across the nation, all the country, and all these winners. And like, hey, let's connect up on Facebook. And I'm like, I don't really have one. My wife's like, well, I'll put you on my Facebook account.
Yeah.
So that didn't last very long. We went on a mission trip and some things, went to Guatemala, made all these friends. And my wife's finally like, hey, you're making all these friends. I don't know these people. You need to go get your own Facebook page, right?
Right.
So that's less than 5 years ago. But during that season, here's what I took away. And in my former company I was at, I realized that their strategy was company brand first. The company was going to be the one in the front. They were going to always brand the company, the t-shirts, the logos, what they talked about. It was all company, company, company. Well, here's what I started to realize is consumer behavior, my friends, my own personal preferences, how I chose to do business with people. It was people first.
Yeah.
And if they were at a great company, wonderful. I'm glad you can deliver the service, but I like to work with people. I love people, people that you like, and you trust, right? And so that was actually a big shift of mine when I made the change in companies, because that was something I saw, that entrepreneurial spirit that our CEO talked about. So I recognized right away, one, I didn't have a personal brand. It was me on LinkedIn. I had built up kind of a decent following, right? It wasn't bad, but it was all people in my industry. And I made a commitment at that time as I was going to start to put myself out there and do video. And I'll never forget, they're horrible. I mean, Mike, when I say they're horrible videos, like if you go back and watch them, I cringe. I'm like,
Yeah.
this is bad. I did the Motivation Monday, I did it for my car. Like I did all the things that we all do when we're insecure and we're just trying to get out there.
Yeah.
But I will say I got in the game.
Right. You need to do it. That's the only
Yeah.
way you get better at it, is if you got to practice it.
Dude, and it was rough. So over the years, what I've realized is I just kept trying to level up. I surrounded myself with people that could teach me. I've hired people in my camp. We mentioned Steve Sims earlier. I've worked really close with Steve and Henry over there. And I've invited people into my life that have those expertise, and I'll allow them to coach me. And I tell them, look, I'm an athlete. You can coach me. I can take whatever you give me. I'm actually indifferent about it. It might hurt my feelings a little bit. I'm a person, but I'm willing to accept feedback because I will take action. And I will say that has helped my brand grow. And then as I started to get into Instagram, and when I do something, kind of this motto of all in.
Yeah.
When I do something, I go all in.
Right.
There's no other way for me to understand it. And I will say this for anybody thinking about it, is my recruiting was good at other companies and business development. It's the first time where I felt like I was in my rhythm. I was attracting the right people. My conversations got better. When I called people, what I loved, Michael, is I could call a candidate, maybe was looking to join our team. They've already looked me up on social. We've already connected. There's this thing of like, even with me and you, right? I'm looking at your podcast. I'm looking at your website before I join.
Right.
I instantly, like right when we get on here, I've never met you in person.
Yeah.
I feel connected. And that's the power. And I grew up, I tell people, I don't know if you had this in the title insurance business, but I grew up and I was coached to make, like 100 calls on a Monday, right? Just call people, call people, call people. What I realized is I could scale this personal branding by doing video and quality content that added value. And I shared my experiences and what I was going through, and I could get that out to thousands of people.
Yeah.
Well, then I started to attract my tribe and the people I wanted. And look, I'm still learning. I'm still reaching out. Even this weekend, I'm going to a conference to learn more and to be around people that have more success in the spaces that I want to get better. It's a never ending journey. You fall in love with the process and you'll be amazed at where you are. And it's not overnight. Man, it's back to sports. If you commit to it 4 years from now, 5 years from now, where could you be?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned the all in thing. So, my favorite quote, and I'll hit you with it because we have mentioned it a couple times on this podcast. My favorite quote is a Gandhi quote, and it as told by me. If you're going to be a bear, be a grizzly. So, if you're going to do something, why wouldn't you want to be the biggest, most badass version of that thing that you possibly can be? And to your point also about like when I first started, I didn't get leads. I didn't get anything. It was like I literally had no background in anything related to title insurance. So I started from nothing and then it built all this over time. And that was one of the same type of advice I got. Maybe not 100 calls, but just start calling people. Most
Yeah.
of my business comes from attorneys. I mean, I have some mortgage clients, but most of my business comes from attorneys here in Jersey, and they don't want to talk to me. They're busy. Right. So I just got shut down. So then I was like, well, I'm just going to like start going to as many different events as I possibly can. That started to show some results. And then obviously last year happened. And then I started doing this stuff, same type of thing. Started putting videos on LinkedIn, started putting videos on Instagram, started getting myself out there a little bit more. And then it becomes that 24-hour a day salesperson because I
Yeah.
don't have to go to as many networking events as maybe I did in my first couple of years because I am there. If you are on LinkedIn and you have not seen my face, then I have failed because most people have seen my face at least once on there. So I could take you to lunch, spend an hour with you, and then the next day you're most likely going to see me again just on your cell phone or your computer or whatever. So yeah, I
So
totally am down
powerful.
with that. Yeah. Absolutely. So, also let's talk about, other ways that you've been able to kind of scale that personal brand. So was the podcast the next thing, or was the book is new? And I know we're going to talk about
Yes.
the book. So the
Yeah.
podcast was the next thing, I'm assuming.
Yeah, it was. I had gone all in on Instagram, and I got very strategic there. And I did kind of a cross pollination of I had a really good following of I think it was around 30,000 or something LinkedIn, which for me was I was really happy. It's a lot of people. And I tried to move them all to Instagram. So that was kind of helpful there.
Yeah.
And then what I realized on Instagram, I started seeing more there and it started popping up on LinkedIn is these people that had podcasts. And I'm like, hold on, in the mortgage space, there's not a lot of people. What would I want to talk about? What would I want to do? I think that's really important for everybody as you're listening to this is like, what is it that you do that nobody else could do like you? What is your unique experiences that you bring to the table? And I realized, I have a really great network of people that are very cool, that have lots of great backgrounds, lots of experiences, and they could come on the show. And it didn't have to be a solo episode. It'd be like this. I would bring them on. I would talk about their story. We would talk about their greatness. We would share value added stuff, give them tips. And if I brought on the right guests and we added value, I'm giving them something of
Right.
content, right? Because we're
Yep.
producing it and giving it back. And then it's a way for me to get some content created. And I remember it was probably Gary Vee had talked about this as, one single episode could result in, 50, 100 pieces of content possibly, right? I was like, well, I don't want to necessarily spend more time because my job, like it requires, I'm sure like you, there's a lot of commitments and responsibilities I need to take care of.
Right.
But if I could do this 1 hour a week, I could prep an hour for each show and get to know my guest and be ready for that. That's 2 hours and I could create these pieces of content. This would be amazing. And that's how the podcast started. And what was cool, I'm sure like you've probably experienced this some too, is then people started to reach out. And then I was invited on podcasts as well. And I was on about 20 podcasts before I launched my own, before I got brave enough. And I finally just put a line in the sand and said, okay, we're doing this. And funny story, this last weekend, I ran into one of our soccer coaches that works with my daughter's team. And he's like, hey, man, I've been listening to your show. Just want to tell you, I love it. I get a lot of value out of it and all that stuff. And kind of talk back and forth. And he goes, and I went back and listened to your first few episodes. And I'm like,
Shit.
uh-huh, uh-huh. And he goes, you've really improved a lot. I was like, coach, that's
Yeah.
a nice way of saying I
Right.
sucked.
Yeah.
I got better. And he's like, man, he goes, here's the thing. it's just like sports, Brian. He's like, you've put in the reps, you put in the time. And he goes, I love listening to you now because your style has come out, the way that you articulate, you tell stories and you do things. And look, for anybody, I didn't realize this when I started the show. I wanted to add value. I wanted to bring on great guests. I wanted to connect with people. I saw it as kind of a business extension. Here is the secret I learned. I don't know if you found this too. It's like, Michael, I've gotten better in other areas. When I do presentations, when I'm recruiting people to join our
Oh,
team,
yeah.
when I'm leading sales meetings, like, holy cow.
Yeah. I'm a stud now. I mean, I am like, you can't
I see
touch
you.
me. I'm the man wherever I go now.
Think about this. The guys like you and me that are doing this, and we're putting in the reps, we're putting in the time. It's like the practice, it's like the training that's going on off the field that nobody else is doing. Then when you show up on the field, they're like, how the hell did he get faster and stronger? And
Right.
what?
Who the hell
And
is
it's
this
like,
guy?
guys,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I love it too from this aspect is probably one of the greatest gifts is learning to listen and being in the moment with people because I have found that translation with our team, this like ups and downs in business and dealing with conflict and issues. Man, that's incredible. I think that emotional intelligence you learn and in a virtual way is quite different than being in person. And this is one of those, man, if you do it and commit to it, I'm so thankful. And that's why I will continue to do it.
Yeah.
And I have fallen in love with the podcast game. And I admire people that do it far better than I do because you go, that is not easy.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the questions that I had about the podcast, I'm on your website over here and I'm scrolling through and I see names that I recognize. Obviously I see Steve's name here. I see Steve Weatherford. I saw him on here someplace because I know I'm a New Jersey guy, so I know the Giant
Oh,
Jets,
yeah.
whatever. And I know he was a part of that.
Yeah.
But so the focus of it does not necessarily scream real estate focused. So talk to me about the connection, if there is one. If there's not, if it's just part about getting yourself out there, that's fine. But is like, how do you draw the connection from having? Because I've not struggled with this, but have
Yeah.
found my balance between what I do for work, what I do for this, and how I'm able to connect them to help grow my business. And they're not all real estate. I mean, I've had on professional athletes and musicians and other people that are just successful in life that, have different stories to share. But talk to me about how you're able to try to draw those same parallels between what you're doing and if there is a way that you use the way that you do the podcast and the guests that you have on, the conversations that you have to help in turn grow the business side of your life.
Oh, that's a great question. So I wanted the podcast to be a reflection of me. And I'm not just a mortgage professional and a mortgage executive. I'm not just a former pro soccer player. I'm not just a dad. I'm not just any one of those things, an athlete that still trains and takes my health and fitness and mental health very seriously. I'm not any one of those things. And that's one of my beliefs is we're all fully integrated. And Stephen Covey said it best of like this whole person theory that we really need to treat all parts of ourselves. And that's what the show was designed around is you could tune in. And I love this because it wasn't necessarily to be an audience for all, but it was people that were driven and they were committed to the best versions of themselves. And they might relate to an athlete. But look, here's what I know. Not everybody's a pro athlete.
Right.
Not everybody played in college like you did,
Yeah.
right? Like there's people that never made it that far, but they could listen to that story and go, you know what? Everyone on the show, including myself, we've all hit rock bottom. We've failed. We've been cut from teams. I've been fired from a job. Like we have had shit hit the fan.
Yes.
You know what's
Yeah.
different about everybody on the show without fail is they picked their ass up and they went and got back in the game.
Yep.
So that's where the show really evolved. And I've tried to keep it. What I'm trying to always do is in the seasons I'm in, what am I learning? What am I going through? Who are the people I'm meeting? If I'm learning and finding value from them, I think other people might as well. And so I want to bring that back and I will sprinkle in. You'll notice probably out of the 55 or so, I think we might be up to 60 episodes recorded now. You probably have close to 10 that are real estate mortgage specific. So
Yeah.
I do put that in there because I think that's important because that is still, look, that's my core role and what the team and in the business I lead. But I don't think that needs to be the center and the focus. There's people that do it better than I do. They talk about mortgage programs and buying your first home, buy your investment home and all that. That's not really the game I'm in.
Right.
I
There's a time and place for that. I mean, if you want to go listen to a podcast about that, that's fine. I mean, I know since I started my podcast, there has been 3 other title people that I know of that have started podcasts, and a couple are very technical and very like, like, what is a schedule A? Like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
okay, great, yeah, we could talk about that. I mean, if you're into that, but I'm not. So that's why I like to have people on and we talk about the stories that they have, and then it grows my network, it grows my relationships, and with everything, and it just makes me more present in other people's minds because I'm just putting myself out there. So I think we're very similar in that way,
Yeah.
as the way that we approach these shows. And then the next thing that came up was the book, which is new. I literally just had it in front of me. Where is it? Conversations with Covey. So let's talk
Yeah.
about what the book is. What drove you to write the book? Did someone say, "Hey, Brian, you should probably write a book," or did you just say, "I'm going to do this"?
So it was a combination of both. I had a coach of mine and some friends around me. They're like, "Hey, you should write a book, right?" Because part of our family has written books, and you got all that stuff going on. You're like, yeah, "I should write a book." And it's that urge. You're like, "I should write a book, but I don't know how to write a book. When am I going to find time?" Like the excuses start to roll, right? Like the credits and the excuses are rolling. And I remember one day I was thinking, and it was one of those light bulb moments that we have sometimes. And it came up. I'm like, hey, you know what? Not everybody listens to a podcast. Some people still like to read books. I'm watching people, you go to the beach, you're hanging out somewhere, and they like to read. My wife's much more of a reader than a podcast person. So I'm watching this happen. I'm like, well, what if we had like our top 10 podcasts of the year that people commented, engaged? I thought they were the best conversations. They were very relatable. They're all very different and unique. What if we took those and just kind of put those into a book? And we took the highlights. What did they share? And it's almost like a TED talk, but in written form in a book. And what if I was able to get people exposure? This, the cost to get in front of all these people that I was able to get in front of in a year, the accessibility to get to all of them, and then to learn what they actually teach in a concise format like I was going to provide, it would almost be untouchable for most people. It couldn't get access to that many of the guests.
Right.
And I thought, man, that would be a cool gift to give out. And it was not to make money, obviously, because books don't make a lot of money. Um, but I wanted to have a book done. I committed myself that I would do it. And I thought that was something I would be interested in reading. If it was like your show and your top 10 guests, and I could go through in 5 minutes, I could read one chapter, if that's all I wanted to read. And I could go, man, like Steve Sims' chapter, for example, or a David Meltzer or someone, you go, I'd love to learn about that. I relate to their story. I connect with them. What's beautiful about that is think about now the exponential reach is all of their audiences. They're now published in a book. They now have content they can share. Well, they're all amazing people, and they distributed it and sent it out to their audiences and helped me promote it.
Yeah.
Now their audiences, some of them are in my camp, some of my group, they're now following them. And I love that. And we're adding value back to the marketplace. And a friend of mine coined this, but it's called collective impact. How do we collectively, those of us that believe the same things, have similar values, how do we go have this collective impact in the market? And I tell you what, it was fun. It was far better received than I thought. Like anything in life, when you're new at it, I was scared, nervous, worried. Like, is anybody going to read this? Like,
Yeah.
I know my parents will buy one, but anybody else?
Mine might, like if I wrote a book, mine might. But
Yeah.
one of the questions that I have too is, as we get closer and closer to the end of this episode, and there's so much that I want to talk about, but time, whatever.
Yes.
But I think one of the things you keep touching on, a couple of things that you keep touching on, are the fact that health and fitness and mental health are very important to you. Finding coaches, using coaches, that kind of stuff. And I think that's one of the things that, and I would be the first one to tell you that I sometimes fall into this trap as well, is that people don't take the time to invest in themselves. And I think that like it's sometimes daunting to be like, well, I'm going to go find a coach to help me do what? Like what? I mean, I already played baseball. Coaches are done. I coached. I know what it's all about, and then like, I've had my weight fluctuations over time because getting out of a college sport is sometimes hard because you're not doing the practice stuff every day, and you sometimes generate some bad habits, but that's neither here nor there. But talk to me about the importance of taking the time to invest in yourself so that all the other stuff can flourish.
Well, it's mission critical. And my belief around it is how we do one thing or some things is how we do everything. And for somebody to tell me that They're committed to all these areas in their business and their relationships and their family. For me, having 3 kids, to not take care of my health is like malpractice because look, my kids want me to be around. I believe, I hope they tell me this. They want me to be around a long time. My
Right.
wife wants me to be around a long time. I have friends, I have goals and dreams that I need time to accomplish these. And I want to leave that legacy. Well, if I don't take care of, let's just start with the physical side. I believe there's a direct correlation. When I'm testing myself, I intentionally do workouts that are difficult, that put me in a pain cave, that I want to quit some days, right? Like I remember this morning, I'm on a run. Guess what? I want to stop. But there are people around me, and in even a class setting, I put myself in those situations. It works for me as an athlete. I have recognized I can work out by myself. And this is something for everybody. You got to figure out what works for you. I can do some things on my own. When I tore my bicep, I was working out at home by myself, but there was something different about going into a class. And that's the same power of like the 5 people you associate and spend the most time with are going to influence you, whether you like it or not. That is just how it is. And we've seen that time and time again. Let's not forget about our mental health, right? And my dad's a psychologist. So I grew up with that, knowing that like visualizations and your mental health, seeing people highly successful break, like people around us that I would go, what happened to them?
Yeah.
Like they were so successful and they crashed and burned. And it's because they weren't taking care of an area of their life. Maybe it was their faith. Maybe it was their finances. Maybe it was their fitness. Maybe it was their relationships and their friends. And so I believe in this, what we call fully integrated, which is how I do one thing is how I do everything. And I'll give you a great example of in my life, what I've realized now is with 3 kids this last weekend, we worked out 3 times with my boys. I've got 2 boys and my oldest is a daughter. And I worked out with my boys. That's quality time. They love quality time with their dad. I'm out there working out, showing them how to lift weights properly. We're having fun. We're doing things. Well, guess what? I'm also getting a workout.
Yeah.
Up here, in my body and my heart. Like that to me is like living a life intentionally and integrated, that for all of us that have the excuse, which is the worst one ever, I believe, of we don't have time. That's BS. We all have time. You choose what you do. And look, I wish I had learned these things earlier in life, but I'm very passionate about that part of, especially as dads and the role models. And you see where homes get broken with, parents that don't have that father figure and things. And I'm like, I'm not going to be that statistic. I'm going to raise my family and do my part and try to be that person. So look, if anything we learned during COVID is people might look okay, but that mental side, and I believe there's a connection to our physical. I've been overweight severely twice. When I was right before I got really good at soccer, around 12, I was actually obese. I mean,
Okay.
bad.
Yeah.
It was one of those where almost 200 pounds, 12 years old, not good,
No.
cholesterol through the roof, horrible. That was my first real breakthrough into fitness. Well, later on, we had our 2 kids. I'm living in Florida. I'm traveling. I'm doing all that. It was another season. And I'll never forget how I felt during those seasons. I felt crappy about myself. I wasn't presenting my best self out there. Probably wasn't a great spouse, right? Like it's hard to be those things if you don't take care of yourself. And so I think we're starting to kind of wake up to the fact that these things are all integrated into who we are, and our identity starts with us. And if I work out, I feel better about myself. So I'm going to stick with it.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. No, I think that's the great answer for sure. And I think that gets lost on a lot of people because, like you said, I mean, people complain about the fact that they have no time to do anything and then watch like 3 hours of Netflix at night. Like you choose how you spend your time, and you could do whatever you could do with it, what you want. But, I mean, depending on what I'm watching, I don't normally feel better about myself after snacking and watching Netflix for a couple hours at night. Sometimes you need it, but to each their own. But yeah, sorry, were you gonna say something?
No, and say, and for where everybody is, it's like, okay, if you're not there, I will tell you something I learned during my season when I had torn my bicep is all I could do was walk for about 3 weeks. Like literally couldn't do anything else. They were like, you can't, just any movement, you don't want to have that tendon that's reattached. So I started walking with my wife. So for anybody out there that's married or, engaged, girlfriend, whatever, that was one of the best things we could have done. Do what you can do with where you are. You can do something.
Yeah.
So I walked.
Yeah. Right. Perfect. Awesome. Love it. All right. So we're getting close to the end of this. I do not want to keep you longer than I said I would keep you. So we're going to move the show into our closing segment, which we call Under the Spotlight. So the Spotlighters have been listening to Mike Ham and Brian Covey talk for about 50 minutes already. We've covered a lot. We've covered your career. We've covered the soccer. We've covered health and fitness. We've covered mindset stuff. We've covered a lot. But what is one thing that you would want the spotlighters to walk away from this episode with, so you are under the spotlight?
Mm. And I love that. And I love what you're doing with your show around this part is I'll give it in two different ways. Is one, when you're grateful for what you have today, it's amazing how opportunities present themselves to you. And and I say that because I've been on the other side of not being grateful for what I had and things crashed and burned and got worse. And I believe there's some power there, some supernatural or some spiritual power of when you wake up daily and you realize you could have passed in your sleep. Things could have happened to you, but you're awake. You're alive for a reason. And be grateful for what you have. And that attitude, I believe, will create other relationships. It will create an abundance mindset. It will create opportunities. It will become who you are. And I think that's something that just it can't be taken away from you. Right? No one can come into my life in the morning. And even this morning, there was some bad news about a friend. But I'm grateful for what we have and where we are today and the struggles and the wins. And that for me is something I would implore everybody, find that for yourself and take time in the mornings just to be grateful. And before you go to bed, like think about what were the highlights? What were the things that went well that day? And remind yourself that you're still alive, you're still getting after it. And that will be something I think that's contagious and will help you in other areas of your life be successful.
Phenomenal. Love that. All right, so let's hit them with the links. If people want more Brian, which after this episode, I can't imagine that they do not want more of you. So where can they go to get more Brian Covey?
Man, love it. So Steve actually helped me with this one. So go www.briancovey.com and it has everything, all the socials, all the book, all the podcast, and a little bit behind the scenes stuff that you can check it out, follow along.
Phenomenal. So that's an easy link. I will make sure that I put my email address, themorningspotlight@gmail.com, and the website, themorningspotlight.com, as always, also in the show notes, along with briancovey.com. The book is Conversations with Covey. The podcast is The Brian Covey Show. Brian, so thank you so much for coming on with us today. This was phenomenal.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on. And thanks for what you're doing out there. We need more guys like you that are getting out there and making a difference.
I appreciate that. And the Spotlighters, thank you for listening, and we will catch you next time.